Sarah loved her job at Bright Future Incorporated. It wasn't glamorous. She wasn't a CEO or anything fancy, but she enjoyed filing papers, answering phones, and helping her coworkers. Everyone at Bright Future was usually pretty nice. Sarah always brought in cookies on Fridays, and she knew everyone's birthday. She worked in a big, sunny office with lots of colorful plants. Her desk was right next to the window, and she loved watching the birds outside. Her favorite part of the job was the people. Most of her coworkers were friendly and always said good morning. But there were a few people, a small group, who acted like they were better than everyone else. They wore expensive clothes, talked about fancy parties, and always seemed to be whispering secrets. Sarah tried to be nice to them, but they mostly just ignored her or gave her funny looks. It wasn't that they were mean exactly, but they definitely weren't friendly. It was more like they thought she wasn't important enough to notice. Sarah just shrugged it off. She knew she was a good person, and that's all that mattered. Still, sometimes their snide comments made her feel a little sad. She wished everyone could just be friends. Even though Sarah tried not to let it bother her, the way those coworkers treated her did sting a little. It wasn't just her either. She noticed they acted like that toward others who weren't part of their exclusive group. Maybe it was because Sarah didn't wear designer clothes or talk about fancy vacations. Maybe it was because she always packed a simple lunch instead of ordering takeout from expensive restaurants. One time, Sarah overheard them talking about her new shoes. They weren't expensive, just comfortable sneakers she liked to wear to work. She heard one of them whisper, "Did you see Sarah's shoes? They look like something my grandma would wear." Sarah tried to ignore it, but her cheeks turned red. She quickly walked away, pretending she didn't hear. She knew they probably didn't mean to be hurtful, but their words still had an impact. It made her wonder if she didn't quite belong at Bright Future Incorporated. She wondered if she should try to be more like them, but then she remembered her grandma's advice. "Always be yourself, Sarah. Don't change for anyone." So, she decided to keep being herself, hoping that one day, those coworkers would see her for who she really was, as a kind, hardworking person who just wanted to be friends with everyone. A feeling of unease began to creep into Sarah's days, a sense that something bad was about to happen. This elite group, as Sarah secretly called them, consisted of 3 people: Tiffany, Chad, and Brittany. Tiffany was the unofficial leader. She always wore the latest fashions, drove a bright red sports car, and seemed to know everyone important in the company. Chad was tall and handsome. With a charming smile, he used to get away with almost anything. He usually agreed with whatever Tiffany said. Brittany was quiet but just as fashionable as Tiffany, and she was always ready with a cutting remark if anyone dared to disagree with the group. They all worked in the marketing department and seemed to think their jobs were far more important than anyone else's. They often had lunch together at fancy restaurants, and Sarah noticed they always seemed to be laughing and having a good time that no one else was invited to share. Sarah knew she shouldn't let them bother her, but it was hard not to feel a little intimidated. They were so confident and sure of themselves, while Sarah often felt like she was just trying to keep up. She wished she could just ignore them completely, but they were always there, a constant reminder that she wasn't part of their exclusive club. She had a sinking feeling that their behavior was only going to get worse. The elite's actions were subtle at first. A little too much perfume when they walked past Sarah's desk, a slightly louder conversation about their weekend plans right outside her cubicle, a quick glance up and down at her clothes with a barely noticeable smirk. They would make comments about office fashion or budget-friendly lunches loud enough for Sarah to hear, but never directed exactly at her. They also did it to other coworkers. Mark, who always wore the same simple button-down shirt, was often the target of their fashion advice. Emily, who brought her lunch in a reusable container, would hear them discussing the best sushi places nearby. It wasn't outright bullying, but it was definitely mean. It was like they were trying to remind everyone that they were better, richer, and more important. Sarah noticed that some of the other coworkers seemed to go along with it, laughing at their jokes and agreeing with their opinions, probably hoping to be accepted into their group. Sarah refused to participate. She wasn't going to change who she was to fit in with them. But she couldn't deny that their subtle jabs were starting to wear her down. She started dreading going to work each day. What new little torment would they come up with next? One afternoon, Sarah was carrying a stack of important documents to Mr. Peterson's office. She was being extra careful because Mr. Peterson was very particular about these files. She had on her favorite skirt, a simple blue one with little white flowers. It wasn't fancy, but it was comfortable and made her feel good. As she walked past the elite's desks, Tiffany, Chad, and Brittany were huddled together, whispering and giggling. Sarah tried to ignore them and keep walking, but then she felt a sudden tug. Her skirt came loose. Sarah gasped, dropping the documents everywhere. She quickly grabbed her skirt, holding it up to keep it from falling completely. She looked up and saw Tiffany, Chad, and Brittany trying to stifle their laughter. It was clear they had done it on purpose. Chad was even holding a small pair of scissors, trying to hide them behind his back. "Oh my gosh, Sarah, are you okay?" Tiffany said, but her voice was dripping with fake concern. "That was so clumsy of you. Maybe you should wear something more secure next time." Sarah's face burned with humiliation. The important documents were scattered all over the floor, and her skirt was barely hanging on. All she wanted to do was disappear. Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes. She quickly mumbled, "Excuse me," and gathered as many of the scattered documents as she could, her hands shaking. She didn't even look at the elite as she rushed away, desperate to escape the situation. She hurried to the nearest bathroom, locking herself in a stall. The tears finally spilled over, streaming down her face. She couldn't believe they had done that. It was so mean, so childish, and so public. How could she ever face them again? How could she face anyone in the office after this? She looked at herself in the small mirror, her face red and blotchy. Her skirt was still hanging precariously, held together by only a few threads. She felt completely exposed and vulnerable. She wished she could just disappear, run away, and never come back. She took a deep breath, trying to calm herself down. She knew she couldn't let them win. She couldn't let them see how much they had hurt her. She had to pull herself together and face the world again, even if it was the last thing she wanted to do. Slowly, she began to repair her skirt as best she could with safety pins she thankfully found in her purse. Back in the office, Sarah could feel eyes on her as she walked back to her desk, her repaired skirt feeling stiff and awkward. She quickly gathered the rest of the documents, trying to avoid eye contact with anyone. She could hear faint giggles coming from the direction of the elite's desks, but she refused to look. She finally reached Mr. Peterson's office, her heart pounding. She knocked softly and waited for him to answer. "Come in," he said. Sarah entered the office, her head down. "Mr. Peterson, I'm so sorry," she said, her voice trembling. "I dropped the documents. I'll reorganize them right away." Mr. Peterson looked at her with concern. "Sarah, what happened? Are you all right?" Sarah hesitated, unsure of what to say. She didn't want to cause any trouble, but she also didn't want to lie. I tripped," she mumbled, hoping he wouldn't press her further. Mr. Peterson studied her for a moment, his eyes filled with kindness. "Well, just be more careful next time," he said gently. "And don't worry too much about it. Just get the documents in order, and we'll forget about it." Sarah nodded, relieved that he wasn't angry. She quickly reorganized the files, trying to focus on the task at hand and forget the humiliation she had just experienced. But the image of Tiffany, Chad, and Brittany laughing at her kept replaying in her mind. After Sarah left Mr. Peterson's office, she went back to her desk. The elite were still laughing, but she noticed something else. Some of her other co-workers weren't laughing. In fact, they looked uncomfortable. Emily, who always brought her lunch in a reusable container, avoided Sarah's gaze but fidgeted nervously with her pen. Mark, who wore the simple button-down shirts, frowned and shook his head slightly as he looked at the elite. Even Susan from accounting, who usually kept to herself, gave Sarah a small, sympathetic smile. Sarah realized that not everyone thought the elite's behavior was funny. Some people recognized it for what it was, mean and unfair. This gave Sarah a tiny spark of hope. Maybe she wasn't completely alone in this. However, She also saw some coworkers trying to join in with the elite's laughter, eager to be accepted by the popular group. They were laughing a little too loudly, their eyes darting nervously between the elite and Sarah, trying to gauge the situation. It made Sarah feel even worse, knowing that some people were willing to sacrifice their own kindness for a chance to be popular. The divide in the office was becoming clearer than ever. The elite and their followers on one side, and everyone else on the other. By the next morning, the story of Sarah's skirt malfunction had spread like wildfire throughout the office. But it wasn't the true story. The elite had twisted the narrative, exaggerating the incident and making Sarah seem clumsy and ridiculous. According to the rumor mill, Sarah hadn't just tripped. She had tripped over her own feet, tripped over a trash can, and nearly taken out a water cooler in the process. Her skirt hadn't just come loose. It had supposedly ripped completely off, leaving her standing there in her underwear. And of course, the elite were portrayed as innocent bystanders who had simply been trying to help. Sarah overheard snippets of conversations in the break room and by the water cooler. People were whispering and giggling, and she knew they were talking about her. Some people even made direct comments, like, "Maybe you should wear pants tomorrow, Sarah?" Or, "Be careful out there. Don't want another wardrobe malfunction?" Sarah felt like she was living in a nightmare. She couldn't escape the humiliation, and the exaggerated stories only made it worse. She felt like everyone was laughing at her, and she didn't know how much more she could take. The spark of hope she had felt the day before had been extinguished, replaced by a heavy feeling of despair. She seriously considered calling in sick, but she knew that wouldn't solve anything. The rumors would still be there when she returned. But amidst the whispers and laughter, a turning point began to emerge. Emily, who had looked so uncomfortable the day before, couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. She had heard the exaggerated stories, but she also remembered the look on Sarah's face, the shock, the humiliation, the tears. She confided in Mark, telling him how guilty she felt for not saying anything or doing anything to help Sarah. Mark, who had also been a target of the elite's subtle jabs, agreed. He admitted that he had initially laughed along to avoid being ostracized, but he now realized that the elite's prank had been cruel and unnecessary. They both knew that Sarah was a kind and hardworking person who didn't deserve to be treated that way. They started to question the elite's version of the story, realizing that it didn't quite add up. They began to wonder if the elite had intentionally targeted Sarah, and if so, why. A wave of empathy washed over them. They realized that they had been complicit in the elite's bullying by not standing up for Sarah. They decided that they needed to do something to make amends. They needed to show Sarah that not everyone in the office believed the rumors and that some people cared about her. They felt bad that they hadn't done anything sooner. Emily and Mark started subtly planting seeds of doubt among their coworkers. They didn't directly contradict the elite's version of the story, but they asked questions that made people think. "Did Sarah really seem that clumsy to you?" Emily would ask, her voice casual. "She always seemed so careful to me." Mark would chime in, "I wonder why the elite were even watching Sarah so closely in the first place. It's kind of strange, don't you think?" They also reminded people of Sarah's kindness and helpfulness. "Remember when Sarah stayed late to help us with that big project?" Emily would say. "She's always been so supportive." Slowly but surely, their efforts began to pay off. Other coworkers started to question the elite's narrative. They began to remember their own interactions with Sarah, realizing that she was nothing like the clumsy, ridiculous person the elite had portrayed her to be. They also started to notice the elite's pattern of subtly putting down other people, realizing that their behavior wasn't as harmless as they had initially thought. The whispers started to change, from mocking laughter to hushed conversations about the elite's mean-spiritedness. A sense of unease began to spread through the office, a feeling that something needed to change. Brittany, the quietest member of the elite, had been increasingly troubled by the changing atmosphere in the office. She had always been easily influenced by Tiffany and Chad, going along with their jokes and schemes to fit in. But deep down, she knew that their behavior was wrong. The guilt had been eating away at her, especially after seeing the hurt look on Sarah's face. She knew that the exaggerated stories were unfair, and that Sarah didn't deserve any of it. One afternoon, Brittany found Sarah alone in the break room, making herself a cup of tea. Taking a deep breath, Brittany approached her. "Sarah," she said quietly, her voice trembling slightly, "can I talk to you for a minute?" Sarah looked up, surprised. She hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to expect. "Okay," she said cautiously. Brittany wrung her hands nervously. I wanted to apologize," she stammered, "for what happened with your skirt. It was mean and it wasn't funny. I didn't want to do it, but Tiffany and Chad, they pressured me. I'm really sorry." Tears welled up in her eyes. "I hope you can forgive me." Sarah stared at Brittany, stunned. She couldn't believe that one of the elite was actually apologizing. She saw the genuine remorse in Brittany's eyes, and a flicker of hope ignited within her. Brittany's apology seemed to break the ice. Inspired by her courage, other co-workers started to approach Sarah, offering their apologies. Emily was the first. "Sarah, I'm so sorry," she said, her voice sincere. "I should have said something sooner. I knew it wasn't right, but I was afraid to speak up. I hope you can forgive me for not standing up for you." Mark followed suit. "Sarah, I feel terrible," he said. "I laughed along with the elite because I wanted to fit in, but I knew it was wrong. You didn't deserve that, and I'm truly sorry." Susan from accounting, who usually kept to herself, also approached Sarah. "I'm not good with words," she said shyly, "but I want you to know that I didn't believe the rumors. I saw how upset you were, and I felt so bad for you." One by one, other co-workers came forward, each offering their apologies for laughing, for not speaking up, or for believing the exaggerated stories. Sarah was overwhelmed by the outpouring of support. She realized that most of her co-workers were good people who had simply been afraid to stand up to the elite. Brittany's apology had given them the courage to do what was right. A sense of healing began to spread through the office, replacing the tension and unease that had been building for so long. Tiffany and Chad watched in disbelief as their carefully constructed world began to crumble around them. Brittany's apology had opened the floodgates, and now, it seemed like everyone in the office was against them. People who had once eagerly sought their approval now avoided them. Their jokes were met with silence instead of laughter. Their invitations to lunch were declined. They realized that they were no longer the popular, admired figures they had once been. They had lost their power. The realization that their actions had been wrong began to dawn on them. They saw the pain they had caused Sarah, and they understood the damage they had inflicted on the office environment. They had been so focused on their own status and popularity that they had failed to see the humanity in others. The weight of their actions pressed down on them. They felt ashamed and embarrassed. They knew that they needed to do something to make things right, but they weren't sure where to start. The confidence and arrogance that had once defined them had been replaced by a sense of uncertainty and regret. They looked at each other, unsure of what to do next. The once unbreakable bond between them now felt strained and fragile. Tiffany, realizing that she was the one who had started it all, knew that she had to be the one to apologize. It wouldn't be easy. Humility had never been her strong suit. She found Sarah at her desk, quietly working. Taking a deep breath, Tiffany walked over and stood before her. Chad stood awkwardly behind her. "Sarah," she said, her voice surprisingly soft. "I need to say something. We all do." She gestured to Chad, who nodded miserably. "We were wrong," Tiffany continued, her eyes fixed on Sarah. "We acted like bullies. We made fun of you, we spread rumors, and we intentionally humiliated you. It was mean and it was unfair. I am truly sorry for the pain we caused you." She paused, her voice cracking with emotion. "We were so focused on being popular and important that we forgot what it meant to be kind. We let our insecurities get the better of us, and we took it out on you. That was wrong, and we promise it will never happen again." Chad nodded in agreement, adding, "We are really sorry, Sarah." Tiffany looked around at the other co-workers who had gathered to witness the apology. "We hope that you can all forgive us," she said. "We know we have a lot of work to do to earn back your trust, but we're willing to do whatever it takes." Sarah listened to Tiffany's apology, her heart filled with a mix of emotions. She was still hurt by what had happened, but she also saw the genuine remorse in Tiffany's eyes. She knew that forgiveness was the only way to move forward. Taking a deep breath, Sarah spoke, her voice clear and strong. "Thank you, Tiffany, Chad, and Brittany," she said. "I accept your apologies. What you did was wrong, but I believe that everyone deserves a second chance." She looked around at her coworkers, her eyes filled with sincerity. "This whole experience has taught me a valuable lesson about the importance of kindness and respect. We all need to treat each other with dignity, regardless of our differences." She continued, "It doesn't matter what kind of clothes we wear, what kind of car we drive, or how much money we have. What matters is who we are as people. We need to be kind, compassionate, and supportive of one another. I hope that we can all learn from this experience," she concluded. "Let's make this office a place where everyone feels valued and respected. Let's be friends." A wave of applause rippled through the room, a sign that Sarah's words had resonated with everyone. A few people even wiped away tears. Felt like a new beginning. The atmosphere at Bright Future Incorporated underwent a remarkable transformation. The subtle jabs and condescending remarks disappeared, replaced by genuine kindness and respect. People started making an effort to be more inclusive, inviting everyone to lunch and including everyone in conversations. The focus shifted from appearances and status to genuine connection and support. Coworkers began to appreciate each other for their unique qualities and contributions, rather than judging them based on superficial characteristics. The break room became a place of camaraderie, where people shared stories, jokes, and support. The water-cooler conversations were filled with laughter and genuine interest in each other's lives. Even the office dress code became more relaxed, as people realized that comfort and individuality were more important than conforming to a certain standard. Mark started wearing colorful ties with his button-down shirts, and Emily proudly displayed her reusable lunch container. The office felt brighter, more welcoming, and more positive. It was a place where people felt valued, respected, and appreciated. The change was palpable. Bright Future Incorporated had truly become a place where everyone could thrive. A sense of community had replaced the previous divide. Sarah thrived in the new environment. She felt appreciated for her hard work, her kindness, and her unique personality. She no longer dreaded going to work each day. Instead, she looked forward to seeing her coworkers and contributing to the positive atmosphere. She started bringing in her cookies on Fridays again, and this time, everyone eagerly gathered around to share them. She even started a small garden on her windowsill, adding even more color and life to the office. Her confidence grew, and she started taking on new challenges at work. She volunteered to lead a team project, and she surprised everyone with her creativity and leadership skills. Mr. Peterson noticed her improved performance and praised her for her dedication and positive attitude. Sarah finally felt like she truly belonged at Bright Future Incorporated. She had always been a good person, but now, she was surrounded by other good people who appreciated her for who she was. She had found her place and she was happy. She even started wearing her favorite blue skirt with the white flowers again, no longer afraid of being judged or ridiculed. It was just a skirt, but it represented her resilience and her ability to overcome adversity. Tiffany, Chad, and Brittany knew that apologizing was just the first step. They had a lot of work to do to earn back the trust of their coworkers. They started by offering to help with any task, no matter how small or insignificant. Tiffany volunteered to organize the office holiday party, putting aside her usual desire for a fancy, expensive affair and focusing on creating a fun and inclusive event for everyone. Chad started bringing in coffee and donuts for the office each morning, a small gesture of goodwill that was greatly appreciated. Brittany, still quiet but determined, offered to help anyone who needed assistance with their work, sharing her skills and knowledge without hesitation. They also made a conscious effort to be kinder and more respectful to everyone, listening attentively to their coworkers' ideas and offering genuine compliments. They stopped making snide remarks and started offering words of encouragement. Slowly but surely, their efforts began to pay off. People started to see that they were genuinely trying to change. They were no longer the arrogant, self-centered elite. They were simply Tiffany, Chad, and Brittany trying to be better people. It took time, but eventually, they were welcomed back into the fold, not as leaders or trendsetters, but as valued members of the Bright Future Incorporated team. Their redemption was a testament to the power of forgiveness and the possibility of change. The story of Sarah and the elite at Bright Future Incorporated is a reminder that even small acts of kindness can make a big difference. It shows us the importance of empathy, of putting ourselves in other people's shoes and understanding their feelings. If the elite had taken the time to understand Sarah's perspective, they never would have treated her so poorly. It also highlights the courage it takes to stand up to bullying. Emily and Mark's decision to speak out against the elite, even though it was difficult, made a huge difference in Sarah's life and in the overall atmosphere of the office. Their actions demonstrate that one person can make a difference, even in the face of overwhelming pressure. Finally, it shows us the power of forgiveness. Sarah's willingness to forgive the elite, even though they had hurt her deeply, allowed everyone to move forward and create a more positive and supportive environment. Forgiveness is not always easy, but it is often the only way to heal and to build stronger relationships. The story of Bright Future Incorporated teaches us that kindness, empathy, courage, and forgiveness are essential ingredients for creating a happy and healthy workplace, and indeed, a happy and healthy world. It's a lesson we can all learn from. At Bright Future Incorporated, everyone now treated each other with respect. The office had become a truly happy place to work. The change wasn't just superficial. It was a deep and lasting transformation. People genuinely cared about each other. They celebrated each other's successes and supported each other through difficult times. They worked together as a team, collaborating and sharing ideas. They had learned that their differences were not weaknesses, but strengths that made them a more creative and innovative group. Sarah continued to bring in her cookies on Fridays, and now, everyone eagerly awaited her arrival. Tiffany, Chad, and Brittany often helped her bake them, laughing and sharing stories. Mark and Emily organized regular office potlucks, bringing in dishes that reflected their unique cultures and backgrounds. Mr. Peterson even implemented a new company policy that emphasized kindness, respect, and inclusivity. Bright Future Incorporated had become a model workplace, a place where everyone felt valued, respected, and appreciated. The incident with Sarah's skirt had been a painful experience, but it had ultimately led to something positive. It had taught them all a valuable lesson about the importance of treating each other with kindness and compassion. And it had transformed Bright Future Incorporated from just a workplace into a true community. They learned that working together can bring great happiness.